Alright, welcome back to the channel, everybody. So for the month of May, I actually only ended up reading 4 books, 3 of which though were pretty heavy. So for my reading speed and real life getting in the way, that's all I got to this month, but here's what I read in May. So, first up, Dark Age by Pierce Brown. So this is book 5 of the Red Rising series. So briefly, obviously, this is the second book of the second trilogy, which takes place with Iron Gold 10 years after the first trilogy. I highly recommend this series. This is a fantastic blend of sci-fi and fantasy. By this point in the story, Pierce flipped what was just single first-person POV of the main character Darrow for the entire first trilogy, and this splits into 4 to 5 POVs depending on the book. I believe Dark Age, you actually get a couple of POV chapters from a 5th character. So this follows the characters of Darrow, Ephraim, Virginia, Lyria, and Lysander. Those are your 5 POVs. It still sticks to that directly first-person POV in each chapter, but multi-POV spreads the story. I'm mixing scope and story. So the story definitely expands with the world because it gets a lot bigger. There's more planets involved, more armies and locations involved in this story. By the time you get to Dark Age, it's total grimdark. This is grimdark in space. Just unrelentlessly, violently grimdark at times. This is very bleak. Not to say there aren't triumphs or, high points for these characters in Dark Age, but it's very dark, and I have no idea where book 6 is going to take us when hopefully that comes out next year. This is actually currently one of my favorite series that I've ever read. Not that I've read a whole lot, but this blew me away. After almost not finishing book 1 of Red Rising, now I'm 5 books into the series. It is fantastic. I burn through these books in a couple of days each time I read them just because they're so gripping and intense, and I love the storytelling. The characters are fantastic. Some of the best friendships and dynamics between characters that I've ever read. Beautiful books. I highly recommend them. Read Red Rising. And the second fat book that I read this month was Valor by Gwynne. Now this is book 2 of the Faithful and the Fallen series. Now this book was infinitely better than Malice, which was book 1. I actually liked Malice a lot, but my complaints with it, and I actually mentioned this in my review for Valor, they were all answered in Valor. It basically fixed the pacing. The characters were more engaging and dynamic. Just the battles are incredible. They're so well designed, and I actually love how Gwynne in the story, because there's so many POVs, there's a lot of characters in these books. If you haven't read them, there's a ton of characters. You do get a lot of A Song of Ice and Fire or Wheel of Time vibes as far as like how many characters and locations there are that you have to remember. There's a lot. He puts a glossary in the front of the book. It's a couple pages long. You're gonna be familiar with those pages. But what I love what he does is the way that he bounces between these POVs is that even in the midst of like a battle, you'll have POV characters on either side, and the story actually bounces between them. So you're not just getting one side of the combat. You're getting, one character taking an arrow and then switch to the POV of the other side of the battle, and there's another POV character fighting on that side. So it gives you a good feel of like, who's there's a lot of like gray area and who's good, who's bad. There are clear good and evils in this book. But just the way that Gwynne wrote these characters, a lot of them are just trying to do their best for whoever they serve, right? Because everybody serves different kingdoms, they're at war, so they're fighting for what they think is right. So that keeps these characters from just being one note, good guys or bad guys, for the most part. This whole series revolves around this god war that happened back in the past, traditional fantasy stuff. There was a war that happened, however many years ago, tore the land apart, and now there's signs that it's coming back. That's where you start with a Malice, and that prophecy and the characters that you're growing with get really fleshed out in Valor. You understand what the prophecy really means, who the players are, who all these different realms are that are, at odds with each other. And this book blew me away. And John Gwynne, what he does incredibly well with combat in these books is the same way that I think Pierce Brown does it, and the same way that Brandon Sanderson does it, that third act of the book is just a roller coaster. And as soon as you hit that peak of like, okay, here we go, and it's just full speed downhill, awesome action. I get a ton of Vikings and Last Kingdom vibes from this book, and I think that is clearly because John Gwynne and his family were Vikings in another life. Like, I'm convinced of that. They reenact Viking wars. They wear helmets. They've got swords and axes, and that shines through here. And it might be recency bias because I'm watching Vikings and I'm 3 seasons in, but I actually mentioned this in my Malice review, that every time someone uses a shield wall in this book, I just immediately picture Vikings and them yelling, "Shield wall!" And I say it that way every time that I read it. But these books are great. I am actually going to be jumping back into it after the second book of the Wheel of Time. I'm probably going to go immediately back into this and read Ruin, just because these books are so good. And I'm fighting with myself internally as to which series to continue when, but I'm 100% getting back into this. And John Gwynne is just a fantastic guy. He's super active on social media. I mean, every Goodreads update I made about this book, every Twitter update I made about this book, he was responding. Instagram posts, I mean, just everywhere. This dude is amazing. Check out Faithful and Fallen. If you're not reading these books, you are missing out. So then, the third tome that I read this month was, of course, The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. So I finally decided to dive headfirst into The Wheel of Time. I actually just reviewed this on Saturday. My longest review by far, because I have a lot of thoughts about this series. I think I'm in the camp of I really, really liked this book, on the verge of loved. The major complaints that I hear a lot about pacing and, lengthy descriptions, things like that, they did not bother me. I ate all of that shit up. I loved pretty much everything about it. The character work was fantastic. The love and detail that he put into this story is incredible. I guess because I have no previous bias towards the story, I went into it fully expecting all of these descriptions and these, people say, oh, he can describe a dress for 5 pages. Honestly, everything was exaggerated, in my opinion. I might change my mind a couple books in and grow tired of them, but I loved reading how descriptive he was, because he has something in mind. He wants you to see a picture a certain way. He wants you to know exactly what his characters look like. He wants you to know what the scenery looks like. And that is fantastic, and I loved it. And with that, the characters themselves, like I mentioned in my review, I feel like Robert Jordan completely intentionally left a lot of mystery to a lot of this, and I have a feeling that it's going to slowly unravel book by book, and I'm going to slowly understand more and more about this world, and that I am super excited for. I probably don't need to convince people to go read Wheel of Time. I am very late to the party, but I absolutely adored this first entry into the Wheel of Time, and I cannot wait to get into The Great Hunt, which I will be reading right after this video films. So by the time this comes out, which will be 3 days from now, I will have already been reading The Great Hunt. And then finally, the palate cleanser to my whatever, almost 2,000 pages between those 3 books, that would be Stormfront by Jim Butcher, which is book 1 of the Dresden Files. I cannot believe that I never read these books. I will have a full review dropping for this on Saturday, but holy crap, this was some of the most fun that I've had in a book ever. I mean, this just gave me such feelings of like, this is a great urban fantasy TV show. Like, I would love to see this, you know, akin to Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Supernatural or other shows like that, mixed in with like police drama, investigative reporting. I mean, just everything about this setting of like modern day Chicago with wizards, but there's also demons and vampires, and just it's blended so well. And Harry Dresden, my dogs are gonna start wrestling while I'm recording this, so that's fun. Harry Dresden is such a fun character. Would you shut it? So Dresden is hilarious. In one of my Goodreads updates, I said that he's my spirit animal because this dude is just super sarcastic. Doesn't waste any moment to just, you know, have some kind of quippy response to somebody regardless of the situation. That's me to a T. I crack jokes in pretty much any situation that I'm in. And I mean, this the crap that this guy gets in this book is just, I don't know, he's hilarious. The world is interesting. The other characters are fascinating. I love the mix of like, there's crime bosses, like there's the Marconi family. So you harken back to like Godfather, you know, style, like mob bosses, and then you've got this wizard who's kind of like a total, you know, up basically, and he's just a blast. I mean, this whole story in this book, you could probably, like, I could easily see this condensed into like a few episodes of a series, maybe even like a Monster of the Week kind of show. If you did like hour-long episodes and you had, you know, Harry goes and fights another wizard who's summoning demons and killing people, like that could be condensed into like an episode of like a 1 hour Netflix series or something. I don't know. I would love to watch this. It was just like, it was so cool, and reading it was incredible. Finished it in a couple of days. I mean, it's really short. It's like 308 pages, whatever it was, but it was a blast. It was perfectly paced, in my opinion. And I mean, chapter to chapter, you're just rolling from one scene to the next. You're following Harry the whole time, and it's one continual like plot through the whole thing. Like, here's what this story is, and you see it to the end. It was like an episode of a show. It was incredible. I loved it. I've already ordered the next 5 books of these. This is probably going to be one of my favorite series that I read all year. I'm definitely going to be mixing these in month to month between Wheel of Time and some other stuff because they're shorter, they're fast-paced, they're hilarious, and it's totally different than anything I'm used to reading. I've never read, you know, urban fantasy before, and this is incredible. And I'm surprised that I took this long to get around to it, but I am all in. But yeah, so those are the 4 books that I read. Once again, so Dark Age, Valor, Eye of the World, Stormfront. Fantastic books. I'm having a hell of a time with the books that I've been reading lately. A couple of months ago, I complained about not really liking a couple of books that I was reading, but everything that I've been reading, perfect. Right up my alley. I love it. But until next time, everybody, keep reading.